I just want to extend a thank you to everyone that is joining us here in person to celebrate the life of Mark Payne, and those of you that are joining us online through our live stream or watching it later on Facebook. And so we remember in many different ways. Many of us have different experiences with Mark and different connections with Mark. But it's a way for us to remember him the way that we best can, the way that we can remember how our connection was with him. And so we are grateful that you're here to share this time with the family and to remember Mark. And so today I wanted to share Psalm 121. It seems really a special text today because of the beauty of the mountains that surround us. He loved his mountains here in Bryson City, and just this Psalm 121, I think, really stands out to us. I'll lift up my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time on and forevermore. Let us pray. Gracious God, we are grateful for the life of Mark Payne, who was with us, but now he is yours. Oh God, we ask that you would be with us in our time of loss and in our time of grieving, that you might give us peace, that you might give us comfort, that you might bring us closer together in your love. Help us to have good memories. Help us to remember the great relationships that we had with him. We just ask that you would create in us new lives so that we might reflect your love in the world. Help us each and every day, oh God, to live as your children so that those that don't know your love may know it. And help us to live out the prayer that Jesus taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. And so today we hear these words from the Old Testament, for those of you who are reading that it was the New Testament. We were messing with you there, and it's really the Old Testament. But it's still a beautiful reading and probably very familiar to many of you that have heard these words before. It reminds us, it's especially timeful for such a time as this, but there's a season for everything and a time for every matter under the heavens. A time for giving birth, a time for dying, a time for planting, and a time for uprooting what was planted. A time for killing and a time for healing. A time for tearing down and a time for building up. A time for crying, a time for laughing, a time for mourning and a time for dancing. A time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones. A time for embracing and a time for avoiding embraces. A time for searching and a time for losing. A time for keeping and a time for throwing away. A time for tearing and a time for repairing. A time for keeping silent and a time for speaking. A time for loving and a time for hating. A time for war and a time for peace. What do workers gain from all of their hard work? I have observed the task that God has given human beings. God has made everything fitting in its time, but has also placed eternity in their hearts, without enabling them to discover what God has done from beginning to end. I know that there is nothing better for them but to enjoy themselves and do what's good while they live. Moreover, this is the gift of God, that all people should eat, drink, and enjoy the results of their hard work. I know that whatever God does will last forever. It's impossible to add to it or take away from it. God has done this so that the people are reverent before Him. Whatever happens has already happened, and whatever will happen has already happened before. And God looks after what is driven away. Well, I think the writer of Ecclesiastes did a pretty good job of reminding us that there is a time for everything. I mean, even over the last year, there's been a time for wearing masks, for social distancing, for vaccinations, for avoiding physical contact. And then it seemed like things were getting better. So there was a time to come back together, to have hugs and to be together again. Well, and here we are today with our masks back on. And so I just wanted for us to be reminded of these words from Ecclesiastes, because it seems like there is a time for everything, yes, under the sun. But it's easy for us to get caught up in the losses. It's easy for us to get so wound up in our pain that it paralyzes us and that it cripples us. But God brings good out of the pain and out of our loss. I heard a saying today where the author stated, we often just see the cross. And we get so wound up and bound up by the pain and the loss in the cross. But God sees an empty tomb. God sees new life past that loss. God sees new life in us. God restores life in us. Oh, don't get me wrong, it's important to mourn. It's important to go through the grieving cycles. It's important to be able to let go of things that are beloved. and that we care about. And there is a time for that, right? Ecclesiastes tells us. The good news is that God can help us to see beyond. God can help us to see beyond the pain that can paralyze us, and God can give us new life. I think Ecclesiastes also reminds us that it's important to be in relationship with each other, that we are created to love and we are created to support each other in good times, but especially in tough times, in times of loss like this. I pray that we are brought closer together in this time. The writer of Ecclesiastes reminds us that things don't always make sense. Maybe now, maybe not for a long time. But God promises to be with us, that God promises to give us peace that goes beyond our understanding. Thanks be to God for this peace that is with us in our loss and in our pain. And so now I want to invite up Nicole or Madison. I think last I heard they were arm wrestling for who was going to go first. Oh, Roberta is going first. Well, I didn't realize she was that strong.
On the 18th of July in the evening, I finally convinced Margaret to let Nicole stay with Mark. Margaret had spent so many nights at the hospital and stayed so long with him, and I know she was so worn out. Nicole stayed, and the next morning, on July the 19th, Nicole called me and told me Mark was very bad. And so Gary and I threw our clothes on, dashed out of Whittier, and headed to Mission. And when we got to Balsam, Nicole called me to tell me that Mark had passed. And I just became so incredibly sad. It touched my heart so much that Margaret had worked so hard to keep him alive. And it was a strange order. The order was that our children bury their parents, not otherwise. And so as Gary drove the car to Mission, I sat there and started writing. And I'm going to call it 40-year-olds, but if you're a parent who's lost a child, it's whatever age your child was at when you lost your child. 40-year-olds. 40-year-olds shouldn't be dealing with colonoscopies. The American Cancer Society says 45 is the time to begin tests for colon cancer. 40-year-olds are supposed to be in the prime of their lives, not battling cancer. 40-year-olds are supposed to be savoring all the best life has to offer, not dealing with chemo. 40-year-olds are supposed to be caring for their aged parents, not the other way around. 40-year-olds are not supposed to be put on life supports. They should be enjoying every sweet breath of life. 40-year-olds are not supposed to die. 7/19/21. Rest in peace, Mark.
So when you Google What should I say at my friend's funeral service? Several tips and suggestions will appear, like, make sure you introduce yourself. Well, that part is easy. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kevin Core. Google also recommends telling the audience how you knew the person that passed away. And you see, that part isn't as easy for me to describe, but here's my best effort to explain who Mark was to me. I consider myself fortunate to have known Mark for approximately 30 years. Many people called us best friends, but in all honesty, Mark and I were more like brothers than best friends. In fact, people saw us together all the time. We were referred to as double trouble by a girl we went to high school with, and I couldn't agree with a better fitting name for our tag team. Mark's personality was straightforward, non-apologetic, and was loyal. His loyalty was second to none. To try to understand how we became so close, I have to take you back to the beginning. Well, almost the beginning. It wasn't the first time I met Mark, but actually the time right after that. In fact, it was at his birthday party. If my memory serves me right, he was turning around 10 years old. What I need to mention first, though, is that our well-intentioned grandfathers were friends with one another. In fact, Margaret has recently told me that our families go many generations back. Isn't that right, Margaret? In 1990, the 10-year-old version of me from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, had just moved to the smallest town in the world. This town was so small it didn't even have a traffic light, and if you guessed that I was talking about Whittier, you are correct. Having moved from Baton Rouge to Whittier, it was total culture shock for me. I left all the friends I knew behind, and so my grandfather could tell I was having difficulty adjusting. And honestly, I was lonely. So Mark's well-intentioned grandfather, Bob, and my well-intentioned grandfather, Earl, made plans for me to attend Mark's birthday party, which was right here in Swain County. So here's where things get interesting. Did I mention that Mark's birthday party was a super soaker water gun party? No, I didn't. Apparently, I didn't get the memo that I needed to bring my own water gun. Or possibly what happened was my well-intentioned, sometimes forgetful grandfather failed to mention this important detail to me. So obviously this means I arrived at Mark's party without a water gun. Right away, I thought, oh man, this is not good. Okay, Kevin, just stay under the radar and away from everyone that has a water gun and you'll be safe. Now hindsight is 20/20, and had I been smart, I would have stayed inside for the duration of Mark's birthday party because Margaret, like any good mother, forbid water fights to occur inside her house. Makes sense. So from what I can recall, the birthday party was eventually moved outside. I reluctantly found myself outside, and within a few moments, all of Mark's friends were seen and heard having the time of their lives, just squirting away at one another. Having almost been sprayed a few times, I made the bold proclamation to everyone outside that had a water gun. I said as loud as I could, if anyone squirts me, I'm going to punch you in the face. And I mean it. Well, I think I made my point because all the kids just stopped and ignored me. And in retrospect, many of those kids figured it wouldn't be fun to probably squirt someone that didn't have their own water gun to defend themselves with. Possibly everyone thought that except one individual. It was probably less than a minute after making my threat, I suddenly felt a strong, cold stream of water hit me right square in the back of the head, like the rudest awakening I had experienced up to that point in my life. You could hear everyone gasp and murmur, uh-oh. Then I could hear them whispering, what's the new kid gonna do? My embarrassed, angry, and shocked self slowly looked around to identify my assailant. Who do you think the person was that sprayed me right in the back of the head? If you guessed Mark, you are correct. Needless to say, I was stunned to see it was Mark, and he was grinning ear to ear, almost as if he was proud to have blasted me in the back of my head. To be honest, I think I was even more stunned to see that Mark was equipped with the largest Super Soaker water gun I'd ever seen in my life. I mean, that thing was huge. It was the size of a bazooka. Feeling ashamed, I wasted no time in rushing towards Mark. I mean, come on, even at the age of 10, my entire reputation was on the line. I had to do something. Mark looked flabbergasted as I grabbed him into a headlock. I swear, in real life, I had that headlock on for a few seconds, but it felt like I had it on him for hours. I heard someone say, "Oh, whatever, new kid isn't gonna do squat. He's nothing but talk." So now my ego was checked yet again, and I felt I had no other choice but to carry out my threat. So I gave Mark a punch to the side of his face on his birthday. I can recall chaos ensuing right after that. And believe me, it was the weakest punch I'd ever thrown in my life. But the dirty deed was done, and now all the kids, including Mark's sister Nicole, got involved in separating Mark and myself from one another. An angry and confused Mark looked at me and said, "Why did you just hit me on my birthday?" I yelled back, "Because I told everyone, and that included you, if someone squirts me, I'm going to punch him in the face, and you deliberately ignored what I said. And for crying out loud, I don't even have a water gun." Mark appeared confused and yelled back, "What are you blabbering about, man? I never heard you say any of that." Mark went on to explain he was in the house filling up his Super Soaker bazooka, which was probably about the same time I was going around making threats to hit people in the face. I truly believe this was just a horrible case of bad timing and miscommunication. But before I could even begin to apologize, one of Mark's loyal friends is now ready to throw down and fight me on behalf of Mark. And in all fairness, Mark's friend was justifiably mad that I'm some new kid that randomly shows up places trying to hit people. Seeing as how I'm in a place of worship, I have intentionally left out vulgar words exchanged between all of us, but I'm sure you can just imagine some of the colorful language exchanged between a bunch of 10-year-olds. As things continued to heat up, I suddenly found that I was now about to brawl with one of Mark's upset friends. But before I could even attempt to throw a second punch, to my surprise, Mark interjected and pushed his friend aside. And I'll never forget this, but Mark got extremely offended and yelled at his friend, "Listen, I don't want or need anyone fighting my fights for me." I was stunned, and I think everyone was too. 30 years ago, I'm still taken aback by how strong Mark's moral development was even back then. I mean, think about it. When he was only 10 years old, he was already on a path of choosing a dignified path for himself. There are adults that can't even do that, and here he was at 10 years old showing everyone that he is independent and can fight his own battles. Any other kid in Mark's shoes could have easily turned the other way while his buddies beat the snot out of me, but not Mark. Mark's decision to be my defender on that fateful day resulted in an unbreakable bond that I can only imagine two close brothers have with one another. Later on in life, Mark continued to make it a point to be my defender. If he suspected anyone was taking advantage of me, well, let's just say Mark didn't go for that. This was especially true with all the different girls I had dated. Since his standard was so high, I finally gave up on trying to get Mark's approval. Then out of nowhere, I finally met the right girl, and Mark finally gives his blessing on the relationship between Tabitha and myself. We didn't have a traditional wedding and actually eloped to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. There were only a handful of people that came to visit us after our private ceremony, but that short list included my mother, and then there was Margaret, Nicole, and of course Mark. After I got married, life went on for both Mark and myself. Our separate career paths consumed us, as the old cliche of 9 and 5 add up. Hey man, let's get together soon. It's been a while. When we would finally catch up, Mark would be sure to remind me how smart and awesome his niece, Madison, was. And if anybody, knew Mark, then they knew how much his niece, Madison, meant to him. He was so proud to show off pictures of his family when we were finally getting together. Because he and I were like brothers, he also had a legit bond with Tabitha and my son, Kingston. And though I didn't see Mark as often as I would have wanted, I didn't fret about it, and neither did he. We could easily go a month or longer and not talk, but we always reconnected as if we never missed a beat. Since July 19th, my life has changed, as I am sure it has for everyone here. Suddenly, I find myself reaching for my phone to send Mark a text message, and then it hits me all at once again. He's not here. I get sad, and very much so, that even speaking about this is probably one of the most difficult things I've ever had to face. There are many things I don't know, but my belief is that Mark would want each and every one of us to prosper in life. And honestly, I can't promise Mark or anyone that I won't get stuck in my own grief from time to time. But what I can promise is that I'll take the very best qualities he taught me, and I will apply those traits until I draw my last breath. And when that day comes, the tag team known as Double Trouble will be reunited in the afterlife, and I suspect this time Mark will greet me and give me my very own Super Soaker water gun, because he has my back. That's just the kind of guy he was and still is to me. Rest in peace, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Hi, I'm Mark's sister, Nicole, and we are so grateful that you're all here. Thank you so much. It means the world to our family. I was 3.5 years old when Mark arrived into the world. I remember looking through the window at him. I not only gained a brother, but someone who I would share a uniquely close bond with. But I also gained someone willing and sometimes unwilling as a participant in my childhood adventures. During a family walk at our grandparents' house when he was about a year old, I asked permission to push my baby brother in his stroller by myself. As we were walking down the steep driveway, I wished I had my bike, because it would have been so much fun to fly down that steep hill. I might not have had my bike, but Mark had some wheels under him. And who was I to deprive him of that thrill? After all, I am a generous sister. So with all my might, I gave his stroller a very strong push, and he went off the hill and off the mountain into our garden. Our parents were horrified, but they found him at the bottom, buckled in safely with a really wide grin on his face. A couple years later, I wondered why I was dressing up my dolls, because they couldn't move or talk, and I had a real person that I could do that to. So when we moved to Galbraith Creek, I dressed him in my finest dresses and hat and escorted him around the neighborhood and introduced him as Emily. And so that's how all of our neighbors met him the first time when we were little. That was probably the last time Mark wore a dress, but he continued to participate in my creative ideas and adventures throughout his life. Most were good, some were not, but every idea came from a place of love and happiness. Mark grew up here in Bryson City in the United Methodist Church. During children's time, Mark would often show his quick wit and unique intelligence. During one service, when the minister was describing the different types of people, he looked at the pews and said, "That's the congregation." He pointed to himself and said, "I'm the minister." And he looked at the choir and he said, "Who are these people?" to the children. Mark said really loud, "They're mammals." That's just how he was. When another Sunday, Mrs. Livingston asked the children what they wanted to be when they grew up, and she received usual answers of firefighter, police officer, doctor. But when Mark answered, he said paleontologist. Even at a young age, Mark was sharp, independent, and knew how to play the angles. Once, when Mom punished him and sent him to his room, she went later to check on him, but he was nowhere to be found. She looked out the window and saw him playing outside. When she asked him how he got out, he said, "I climbed out the window and just dropped." But he justified his actions by looking up at my high window, and he said, "I'd really have gotten hurt if I got out of that window." Mark enjoyed growing up here in the mountains. He was extremely close with our grandparents, the late Robert and Clarine Varner. My grandfather, who we called Bob, took the family on numerous camping trips during the weekends and summer vacations, which helped shape Mark's appreciation for nature. One afternoon at Smokemont, I found him calmly petting what he thought was a beautiful black cat. When I moved closer, I found that his new friend had a long white stripe down its back. He loved animals. All animals loved him, even the skunks. Mark received a Nintendo for Christmas at the age of 8. He discovered a lifelong passion for video games and a fascination with technology and the possibilities that could unlock. In the early days of dial-up internet, Mark loved online games, and he did that in most of his free time. But when the first monthly bill arrived, Mom had to put that on hold for a little while because it was about $400. And as console and online gaming technology grew, so did Mark's passion for it. He shared his love of gaming with his friends and spent hours playing with them. Mark carried that passion onto college and his professional life. He majored in computer science in UNCA and later graduated from AB Tech with an associate's degree in computer science. After college, he lived and worked in Asheville for a few years before he moved back to Bryson City, where he could be closer with Mom and Nanny. Mark worked as a consumer service specialist at Drake Software. He excelled in his job because he was able to translate his extensive technical knowledge of software to his customers in a simple and easy-to-understand, matter-of-fact way. Mark often traveled on sales trips where he took full advantage of the opportunity to explore the towns and communities he visited. Never once did he sit in his hotel room and watch TV. Mark planned an itinerary for every trip. He visited the monuments in Washington, D.C., ate the best barbecue in Texas, and explored exhibits in New Mexico and Chicago. He almost literally missed the bus or the boat in Chicago for the architectural tour, but he made it just in time with seconds to spare. In the early fall of last year, Mark experienced some discomfort and visited his physician. In November of 2020, Mark was diagnosed with colon cancer. He handled the news as he handled himself, with quiet dignity, a full knowledge and understanding of the situation, and the utmost privacy. When Mark was in elementary school, one of his teachers told Mom that she loved Mark's sparkling eyes. After the chemotherapy treatments, his eyelashes grew longer than they ever had before, making his eyes appear even more beautiful. Despite the countless blood transfusions, blood clots, medications, and the huge toll that was placed on his body, he never lost that sparkle in his eyes. Thank you again so much for coming to see us all and to celebrate Mark's life.
Are you okay? Every Christmas, it's my job to go under the tree and hand everyone their presents. A few Christmases ago, I saw a gift from Uncle Mark to my dad. I tried to pick it up, and it was super duper heavy. So when my dad tore open the wrapping paper, he saw it was a gift from Man Crates. And then I realized why it was so heavy. The gift was a concrete block that came with a little mini hammer. My dad went outside and used the hammer to smash open the concrete. Inside was a box full of hot sauces, and not just regular hot sauces, some of the world's hottest hot sauces. Uncle Mark wasn't there for that Christmas, so we put the gift aside, waiting for him to visit. Next time he did come to visit us in Florida, my dad joked at dinner that if I misbehaved, he would hot sauce me and put one drop in my food. After that, I went to bed, so I wasn't around for the rest of the story, so the rest is according to my mother. But apparently, my dad and Uncle Mark put all the hot sauces Uncle Mark gave Daddy on the table and lined them up depending on how hot they were. And they put out some crackers too. One by one, hot sauce by hot sauce, they tried them in order. They also ate really hot potato chips and really hot popcorn that came in a set as add-ons. They tried each sauce, analyzing the flavor. They were fine for the first few, but as they got further down the line and tried the hotter hot sauces, both of their faces started to turn red, and they were drinking more and more water. The second to last hot sauce, which was ghost pepper, really made them start to sweat. And when they got to the final hot sauce, which was California Reaper, Mom said they were fine at first, but both of them started scraping their tongues with their fingernails. They drank a lot of water, and of course that made it worse. They frantically started searching through the refrigerator and freezer, looking for any kind of dairy that would cool their tongues down. They didn't plan on trying the sauces tonight, so we didn't have any milk or ice cream in the freezer. But we did have a curtain of heavy cream. Each of them took turns chugging the heavy cream. Mom said she left the living room for a minute, and when she came back, she saw Uncle Mark in the freezer with the door open and his head in the freezer. And my dad was running around the dinner table in circles. She said she started laughing at both of the idiots. Mom said until that day she'd never seen Uncle Mark cry. Even though that present kind of backfired, Uncle Mark always got the best presents for everyone. He always put so much thought into it, even Santa Claus couldn't compare with him. My parents always told me he spoiled me too much, on my birthday, on holidays, or whenever he came to visit. He got me some of the best doll sets, the video games, and amazing Lego sets. But also he got me just super fun random things, like a giant confetti popper from Bass Pro Shop. When my mom, dad, and I came up to visit Uncle Mark a few weeks ago, and we knew his birthday was coming up, I decided I did not want to get him a regular birthday card, and instead got him a special one, which at first just looks like a regular card, but when you open it, it starts saying happy birthday, so nothing too special, but it doesn't stop singing happy birthday. And it will do this until the battery dies, around 6 hours later. And there's no way to turn it off, so if you close the card, shake it, nothing. And if you get so frustrated that you rip the card in half, it will stop, but glitter comes out of the card. Now, sadly, I never got to give him this card because, as you know, he passed away a couple weeks before his birthday. But I just wanted to let him know that I love him so much. And I think he would have approved of that card. And I love him so much.
I'm just going to do a candle lighting ceremony for Mark. The first candle represents our grief. The pain of losing you is intense. It reminds us of the depth of our love for you. Try different. Mark, are you playing jokes on me? So the first candle represents grief. The pain of losing you is intense. It reminds us of the depth of our love for you. The second candle represents our courage to confront our sorrow, to comfort each other, to change our lives. The third candle we light in your memory for the times we laughed, the times we cried, the times we were angry with each other, the silly things you did, the caring and joy you gave us. The fourth candle we light for our love. We light this candle that your light will always shine. We cherish this special place in our hearts that will always be reserved for you. We thank you for the gift your living brought to each of us. We love you and will remember you. And that was somewhat of the call and the response from Mark. I am the love you cannot see, and all I ask is look for me. Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing your wonderful memories of Mark. And so we thank everybody for being with us here today, being with each other here today, to lift each other up in love and in support. I wanted to let folks know that the family would like to invite whoever would like to go back. There's a little barbecue luncheon back in the fellowship hall. Probably the easiest way is to go out this door. You can kind of wiggle your way through the church. It's almost easier to go outside. But we'll let the family go first before we go back there. We also have one more song before we go, but I wanted to let everybody know that you're invited to join the family back there if you care to. So thanks again for coming, and may God be with you, and may you have good memories of Mark and feel God's peace in this time. Amen.